Okay. According to IT, my camera is not functional. And
We're waiting on Bonnie. Bonnie going to be here?
I haven't heard that she's not.
And Eric, right?
For those of you who may not have seen it, Kurt sent us an email, sent all of us an email, sort of a summary page of the math involved. And if you haven't seen it, you have a second to pull it up.
I can share my screen also, Mary Jo. Just let me know.
That's a great idea. Thank you, Kurt.
All right. I'm actually in our office today. I'm on a single screen, so bear with me if I'm sure this will work.
And Jesse's here too, I see. Hi, Jesse. Here comes Eric.
Can everybody see that?
Yes. Got it.
So
Sadly, yes.
yeah. It's okay. We if I'm not mistaken, we have 400,000, right, for the grant.
You're not mistaken.
Okay, so yeah, we're certainly over budget as we sit here today.
We'll discuss that as soon as we open.
Oh yeah, okay, sorry.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, right now with those we have present and accounted for, I have Kurt Procharena from BSC, Carly Corbo from BSC, Eric Olson from the committee, Frank from the committee, Frank Papalardo from the committee, Jesse Harris from BSC, Jim Lampos from the committee. Michelle, thank you for setting us up. And then I have Tim Griswold from the committee joining us. We have a quorum. So
Recording, Mary Jo, just make sure.
yes, we are. Thank you for setting me straight there, Frank. Last time.
Remind you.
So I'll call the meeting to order at 1:04 p.m. and hopefully Bonnie can join us when she can. Today's meeting is the meeting of the CCGC special meeting of June 15th. And the primary goal for today is to continue with our project planning and estimating so that we can really set some goals going forward. And to that end, at our last week's meeting, we asked BSC for some numbers so we could see where we are based on the preliminary design, actually into the final design for Hartford Avenue, and I guess semi-final design for Shore Road. And Kurt sent us this afternoon a copy of a summary of the work, and he's going to explain the numbers to us in a little bit. And if there's anything else that I need to set the stage for, anyone can speak up right now. Otherwise, I'll turn it over. Okay, Kurt, you have the stage.
Okay, great to see everybody. And I'm glad my camera's working. So a few quick housekeeping things that I just have on my little summary list. I was able to get a hold of Connecticut Water last week, Dwayne Pert. their project engineer. He confirmed that the 2 hydrants on Hartford Avenue would not be changing in any way, shape, or form. Talked to him about what the project was, and he saw no issues with what we're doing and didn't have any need for us to do anything different, or had no desire to make any modifications to the hydrants. So that sort of action item, I think, is closed. That was good. As I mentioned last week, I have been trying to get a hold of District 2. Tried again on Friday. I have 4 people at Condot District 2. Contact information for our contact at the district is Rick Chapman, who I haven't been able to get a hold of. So I called all 4 of those people on Friday. Couldn't get a hold of anybody. I also called all 4 of those people this morning in attempts to get a hold of somebody with no success. So I'm extremely, obviously, frustrated with that. On Friday, I also put a call to Craig Babowitz. He is the transportation engineer in the planning group up in Newington at DOT headquarters, who is kind of our project-wide connectivity grant point of contact. And I was going to appeal to him to see if he can help out with getting somebody from District 2 to get back to me. And I have not heard back from him yet. I think what I'm going to essentially do this week is call these people every day and at least try to get a hold of a human being, and then whoever I may get a hold of, ask them to somehow help me get a hold of Rick Chapman. I know at the last meeting we talked about utilizing some additional outside help, if you will. I want to give it another week because I don't want to upset anybody and have that end up working against us. If the committee feels otherwise, I'm totally open to, your thoughts, but I'm thinking if I call these guys each day for 1 more week and then don't have any luck, including Craig Babowitz, then it's probably time to ask for some help, because we have certain questions for the work on Shore Road that it's very important for us to be able to talk to DOT and get their feedback as we're forging ahead with the design. Schedule wise, we are still doing okay. I will call up our schedule as we do each meeting, and I'll share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
So there we are today. We are past the halfway point of final design. I feel, budget issues aside, we'll talk about, we're in great shape on Hartford Avenue. We'd like to, and that's something we want to talk about today, we'd like to submit a review design of Shore Road to DOT next week. We'd like to get the committee the design this week after today's discussion, have you guys take a look at it, and then get that into DOT's hands, knowing that they'll have some feedback on various pieces, driveway geometry, et cetera, et cetera. Those are some of the questions that for them. But our thought process is, if we're not going to be able to get a hold of them, let's at least get something in front of them, and that will force them to have something to react to. Again, we're open to suggestions on that, but I want to keep pushing the design process forward. Even if we can't get these questions answered, we'll just leave those as blanks and say, DOT, we need your feedback on these items. Okay, so cost estimates. Carly has joined us today. She's been the one leading the cost estimates on the project, and she's done very similar cost estimates on other similar work that we're doing over in New London and Tolland and Stratford and whatnot. So she's very good at the cost estimating process. We've been working together to make sure that that we have everything in there. And we will continue to refine these estimates as the design moves forward. Clearly, our goal now is that we're in this over budget situation. And we have to look at ways to shave some costs off. So we'll talk about that a little bit today. So what I thought I might do very quickly is run through two estimates, starting with Hartford Avenue. We had talked about various assumptions and those kinds of things, and we'll talk about those assumptions as relate to the cost estimate, so everybody's clear on what that estimate includes. And Carly, please feel free to jump in as you see fit if I leave something out or if I misspeak on something. So globally, you saw the description that I put for the sidewalk on Hartford Avenue. It's the 7.5-foot sidewalk, the 2-foot decorative strip, stamped concrete, colored. It's a monolithic sidewalk, which means everything is essentially one piece, and that's for durability. That's really the main thrust of what the project is. All the aprons that pass through the sidewalk are concrete, and all those things are reflected in the estimate. Moving beyond the sidewalk itself, we're including the mailboxes at the select locations where there are mailboxes. We're including sleeves at all addresses on the road for potential future installation of mailboxes. Signs as a cost-saving measure will be reused unless there were certain signs that the committee really felt needed to be replaced, but the signs, relatively speaking, aren't in that bad of condition, so we would just as well remount them. We are proposing new posts. We have found that obviously posts get twisted, bent, and then in particular when they are removed, a lot of times they get damaged. At the end of the day, it's easier to just put in new posts. So all the posts will be new, kind of the CONDOT standard, in a sleeve in the sidewalk, again, because it's concrete. That is the sidewalk itself. Then we talked a lot about what happens at the back of the sidewalk. So we had talked about the various elevations, particularly at a few properties, and we had talked about some specific numbers that we could use as hard and fast criteria. And myself, Jesse, and Carly worked a lot on this last week, and we did some very close analysis. And what we did is, and this is where I wish we were around a table because I could throw this plan right on the table and point to everybody, but I'll do the best I can. We did an analysis looking at the back of sidewalk down to the right of way. And what that was intended to do is determine really what are we up against relative to the walls. At the last meeting, we had talked about, let's pick a number and decide at what number or what differential elevation we think a wall would be appropriate. So we started kind of looking at things saying, well, let's see what we're up against now. Maybe it's something like 1.5 feet, 2 feet, knowing that then it becomes kind of steep to traverse that slope. So we went through and did an analysis, and really we were actually happily surprised to find that the worst case occurs at 23 Hartford Avenue. That's where we have the greatest differential from the surface elevation at the back of our sidewalk down to the edge of the right of way. So if you could picture that in your mind's eye, we have a 6-inch reveal at the street. We go back 7.5 feet on our sidewalk. So at the back of our sidewalk, down to the right of way, it's 11 inches. And that's the worst case scenario. Not too bad at all. Some of the other ones are 9 inches, 7 inches, 9 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches. So what that told us pretty quickly was we feel that sloping from back of sidewalk down to the right of way with grass is an appropriate and reasonable design option here. Feeling that because we don't have 1 foot, 1.5 feet, 2 feet, we don't feel we really need any kind of retaining walls. It certainly reduces cost and it simplifies things. So we wanted to talk to the committee about these dimensions now that we have the hard and fast dimensions and see what your thoughts were about just keeping it simple and just making that a grass slope. So that's our first kind of discussion item. And obviously it plays right into the cost of the project, but because it's a cost saving item, we'd like to see what your thoughts are, how you feel about just going with a grass slope.
Well, the grass slope was included in your budget analysis. You didn't include anything other than grass slope in that. Am I correct?
That is correct. Yep. We started off by saying, let's see what it looks like, and then we can always layer things in. And we do have the other costs. But then when we saw the numbers, we said, uh-oh, we better make the grass slope the basic project.
Kurt, what's the percentage slope from the back of sidewalk to the right of way on the driveway?
On the driveways, we're
Yeah.
looking at 5%, and that's the next one that we'll talk about. We have some good information. on that too.
So that's the 11-inch drop, right, at 23.
No,
Oh,
that
okay.
is from back of sidewalk down to the edge of right of way, non-driveway areas.
Okay.
The reason it's different is because whereas on that short slope, we can kind of go, it's a relative term, but fairly steep.
Mhm.
When I say steep, putting a mower on it, not a big deal. But suddenly if you wanted to traverse it with your car, different scenario. For the driveways, we've kept at that 5% that we've been talking about because of the town regulation and the concern that if somebody has a smaller vehicle, I always use my Honda Accord as an example, anything steeper, when you get to the bottom of the driveway, you rip the front bumper off. So the driveways, we kept to 5%.
Okay.
So how does the committee feel about the slope as a design option, non-driveway? And I also want to point out, we did not include, as we talked about last time, any of the stairs or the walk extensions. And from my perspective, clearly it's up to the committee, but I'm actually comforted by the fact that these elevation differences aren't that dramatic, because when I was picturing things in my mind's eye, I guess I was picturing it a lot worse than it really is. I was picturing something that was this 2-foot differential, thinking, oh boy, if somebody had to walk up that slope, if there wasn't a walkway. Well, now we're looking at differences 5 inches, 3 inches. Yes, we do have the 11, but most of them, it's pretty subtle. And boy, it will sure save us money to not have to end up putting in stairs and walkways. That's, so
3/4, 9 inches, 11 inches. That's over how many feet?
yeah, that's about, Jesse or Carly, do you happen to know that dimension? Hold on, Frank, I can give that to you right now.
Well, from right away to back of sidewalk, it's variable, but 3 to 4 feet, something like that.
Yep.
5 inches over 3 feet. It's really pretty insignificant.
That's right.
On the desk over there.
How does the committee feel about the grass slope option? moving forward one of the goals here is to proceed into the final design, and then we'll definitely talk about some cost saving things, but we just want to get past some of these design decisions.
Kurt, Tim, when you do the driveway going into the property with a ramp, will there be any need to match sidewalks to that 5-degree slope of the ramp, do you think?
Yeah, so let's talk about the driveway. So if you recall, we have, in order to minimize the elevation differential at the driveway, we have depressed the sidewalk. So in other words, we're not ramping up to the sidewalk, going relatively flat, and then down. We have depressed the sidewalk at each driveway. So if you recall, when we were looking at some of the colored graphics that Jesse did, on either side of the driveway, there will be a panel, essentially, of the sidewalk that ramps down and then goes across the driveway. Then from the back of sidewalk down, we're holding that 5%. So we feel that that will be good for vehicles traversing through that area. And then what we did, looking at the elevation difference, similar to what we did for back of sidewalk to edge of right of way, we looked at back of sidewalk holding a 5% driveway. Where did that put us? So before we looked at it, we had a fixed beginning point and a fixed end point. With the driveways, we have a fixed beginning point, a fixed slope. So then we run that slope down and see where it ends up. So we've gone ahead and done that on the plan, and it's very similar to what you saw last time. And this is where we're talking about the work that's on some people's properties. So we went through and did a similar exercise and asked ourselves, what's the greatest elevation difference we need to traverse with a driveway? And it's obviously a little larger. The greatest elevation difference we came up with was 18 inches, and that's at 11 Hartford Avenue. We have other numbers such as 9 inches, 13 inches, 14 inches, 12 at 27 Hartford Avenue. That's the one with the chain link fence and the 2 driveways. They're both 12 inches. Essentially what we're doing is we have to traverse with these new little driveways, or driveway, I guess, add-ons, if you will. Those are the elevation differences we need to overcome. So holding the 5%, that's why those elevations were important. All of these driveway add-ons, and if you recall, they vary between bituminous pavement, a couple of gravel ones, and then grass. And the grass is reinforced grass. Those are included in this estimate, because if you recall last time, we talked about the fact that we had to give people driveways. We wouldn't be able to just slope down and make the driveways, for all intents and purposes, impassable. So again, the driveways are included in this estimate, essentially giving each one this little add-on extension. Tim, did that answer your question? I'm sorry that was long-winded.
Yeah, I guess if you're saying the worst case between the back of sidewalk to the owner's property is 11 inches, the driveway apron going back, the worst is 18 inches. So is that because the homeowner's property dips further when it gets inboard into their property?
Yeah, that's correct. It's because the elevations are variable. And yes, basically, yes, that's the answer.
So-
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do you think, on the inboard side, on the house side, I guess if the ramp is near the property line, you'd have to feather that in toward their lot? If it's soil?
Well, yep. So if you envision, and we do have that in the estimate, if you envision the section of driveway that the project will construct, it's basically a wedge, right? It's high at the back of the sidewalk, and then it comes down. It's basically a series of triangles. So it's a big wedge. At the edges of that wedge, obviously, we can't just leave it exposed and open, as you may see, let's say, like a concrete ramp where it would just have vertical sides. So we have assumed that we will put in topsoil material and feather those edges in and blend them into the yard.
And I guess that one house has those lateral sidewalks that intersect the driveway, so that might be a matching problem on that particular lot.
Yes, that's 27 Hartford Avenue. We talked about having to potentially replace a few segments of the sidewalk to adapt it. Absolutely, that would have to take place. And after today's meeting, we'll be able to get something that's extremely specific about that as we produce, provided we get the green light from the committee to produce those individual plans we had talked about that we would have to then use to approach and sit down with each homeowner.
Would that increase this $303,000 number because the feathering and all that stuff is that part of the bid? And
We have carried that in this estimate.
including the sidewalk panels?
Yes, and those are carried. We didn't include a specific line item, but for now we carried them in some of the other items just so that money was there. And once we refine the design, we may get to the point where we sort of surgically break those out, so you can see them separately. As I mentioned last time, it gets kind of difficult to break out items that relative to the overall cost might be so small, but for completeness, we may just do that anyway. So we've talked about the slope at the back of the sidewalk, grass slope, no stairs, no walkways. And we've talked about the driveways where we need to extend the driveways onto the private properties. Pretty much that's Hartford Avenue. Knowing that we're over budget on the total project, it's interesting. I was looking at the original estimate we did back for the grant, and we had Hartford Avenue at $394,000. Not necessarily direct comparable because we were assuming granite curb and other things. So anyway, that's Hartford Avenue. What I've been thinking about is on Hartford Avenue, what are some things we could do to save cost? I'm not sure, because there's really no big chunk of the project that can be removed. The opportunities to save large cost items are limited. As an example, the stamped concrete for the 2-foot decorative band, that's about $39,000. If we eliminated that, theoretically, we could we could, it wouldn't be the full 39 because that includes some of the base concrete work, but we could save some money. So at our next round of design, we could look at those kinds of things. Other things that are included in the project, there's no really large chunks of the Hartford Avenue portion of the project that can be just removed to save significant dollars. Are there?
You could go back to basics and just leave the asphalt curb in and the grass buffer and just go with a sidewalk. A sidewalk, which was kind of the basic plan at the beginning, just a sidewalk 4 feet or 5 feet wide in a couple of feet and with the dip downs for the driveways, just a sidewalk, which was originally what kind of the concept was.
Yep, that's certainly an option. And I do want to stress that would still have to include driveways because of the elevation difference.
But it wouldn't, but the curb and the buffer strip would essentially remain. And
That is
so
correct.
would require some driveway issues. But I would imagine that that's a big chunk of change with the curb and the buffer strip going away. And then of course the mailboxes go away too, because we don't no longer have sleeves that we have to put in and putting in separate mailboxes, and there's a certain degree of individuality that still remains with each homeowner. I have no concerns with people mowing that 1 foot strip. Nobody wants their property to look terrible. They mow it now, so I don't have a concern with them mowing it later, which I know that some people had a concern with. So as far as the slope leading down to the property, I'm all for, if a homeowner wants to have a side or steps put in, fine, at their expense. Period. Case closed. If they want planters, fine, at their expense. They could have our contractor do it while he's there, or they could do it later on with their own contractor. But that's how we did it on the southern part of Hartford Avenue when we ran into those situations, and there's no reason, it worked there, so let's let it happen up there, northern part.
I have a question on the curb. If we just leave the existing asphalt and the grass buffer that's there now, are we going to have issues of variable reveals coming down to the properties? I think, one of the that Ed Butcher had was when Hartford Avenue was regraded, his curb, the reveal there was a little too shallow, and during rainstorms, the water, overtops that curb property. That's my understanding of the situation.
Yes, mine too, Jim.
So what this project does, when we have uniform 6-inch reveals on those curbs going down the street, plus a uniform pitch from the back of sidewalk to the curb, all those drainage problems go away on all the properties uniformly.
Well, the pitch on the sidewalk that doesn't change. The pitch on the sidewalk will always slope towards the street, if I'm correct.
Yes, 1.5 towards the gutter line.
So the pitch of the sidewalk will always slope towards the street, and the sidewalk will dip towards each driveway. So there will be that 1.5 inch reveal on that driveway cut, which they don't have now. So I understand what you're saying, Jim, but I think that the fact that the sidewalk is integral to the ramp really eliminates that concern.
Right now, I'm also under the understanding that the bituminous curb that's out there is a 6-inch curb, that it's uniform along the length of the project. I think what happens at the butchers is that when there are certain rainstorms that are intense enough and the gutter flow rises above the lip that's at their driveway, and then it overtops that lip, If you recall, last time we had talked about the town has a requirement for 1.5 inch, correct, Jesse? 1.5 inch lip. I'm not exactly sure what the butchers have, but it's a decent there. But when you get those really intense rainstorms, the gutter flow grows in depth as more water is trying to get flow down the street, and then it overtops their lip. Normally, that's not an issue if you've got a level driveway, you know, or a driveway that has a slight pitch. They are so depressed down that the water just it wants to run downhill, and it unfortunately just congregates because they are the low spot. They have blamed the town for it. I do not think that's correct. It's just a function of their property's elevation, because there is a there. The curbing is good continuous 6-inch curbing. It's just that when the rain gets to that extent, it goes over the lip.
So Kurt, are you also saying that rain that flows down in that kind of situation from the neighbors to the north of the butchers will also end up in their yard?
Probably not, because if you're talking about flow that would occur inside the roadway, so it's not gutter flow, it's not roadway flow, it's on people's properties. Because they're all grass or gravel, that water is going to tend to get infiltrated into the ground, absorbed by the soil, which is why we always do try to promote what we call pervious surfaces, right? We like to minimize pavement when we can, when it's practical, because once you pave something, we have to send that water somewhere. So personally, I do not feel that a large amount of the water that the butchers are unfortunately experiencing on their property is the result of flow from adjoining properties.
One of the other things the butchers shared, thank you, Kurt. One of the other things the butchers feel and that they shared with us is that over time, that part of Hartford Avenue was crowned, so it got higher over time, which is another reason water tends to flow into their property, being that they are so low. And I think that's why we were hoping that the other version of the project would keep some of that, more of that water from overtopping the curb. So if we went with asphalt, is there anything else we could add at their curb?
Yes, if you recall, on the first project, some of the driveways, we put in those trench drains to intercept some of the water. And that's because of where the existing catch basins were located. We couldn't change the physical locations of the basins. So to trap some of that water where the elevations were working against us, for lack of a better term, and there was a concern, kind of similar to what we have at the butchers, we put those trench drains in, and I can't remember off the top of my head how many, I mean, it was maybe 2, maybe 3 locations, and that's how we dealt with it. Something to intercept the water before it hit, and those were put in pretty much at the gutter line.
They worked, they worked, if not work, at least they were perceived to work well by the customer. And, you know, these people are the customers, so we need to make sure we're aware of that, so.
Well, those were because we were putting in the bump outs. Isn't that correct? Because the bump outs would interfere with the flow of the water down the street.
Yes.
So we're trying to essentially traverse the bump out with the water.
Yep, and was where we had calculated that there was not a catch basin close enough to a bump out, I'll call it upstream of a bump out, to capture the water. We didn't want it to collect and pond.
Right. So that was a situation where we were actually interrupting the flow of the water in the gutter. So
Correct.
we
Yeah.
had to do that. There's no
Yep.
choice in that matter.
And
Here we
something,
may have here we may have one or two properties, the butchers, maybe one other property where that might be an advantage, and at least divert or collect some of the water before it hits the driveway.
yeah. One of the challenges with a property such as the butchers, using it as an example, is, as everybody knows, there's very shallow groundwater in this area, and it's actually tidally influenced. There are times where you can look down into the catch basin and see the groundwater literally a foot down from the grate. I remember one time during the previous project, I made a site visit, and at the corner of Pond, was it Pond in Hartford? I can't recall, but the groundwater was at the grate. It was right there. So what? Yeah. So what happens is, because we had thought about, well, maybe we could give the butchers a drain or something on their property. The problem is it's already full of water. So the water has nowhere to go. So the drain and the drain piping obviously has to have a pitch. There's nowhere to pitch to. It's already underwater because of the elevation of that property. So it's certainly a challenge. Not only are they getting flow, and again, only during higher storm events where it's overtopping the lip, not only are they getting that flow, they're actually getting groundwater that is just seeking its own level. Anywhere where that groundwater exists, they're the low spot. So they're kind of getting double whammied just because based on the physical orientation of that particular piece of property.
Look, we're going to take, let's assume for a moment, we'll leave the asphalt curb where it is. Okay, so that prevents water from going onto anybody's property already. We're going to come back a foot and a half, 2.5 feet with a grass strip. Then we're going to take a sidewalk, pitch it back towards the gutter. Okay, and then we got 7 feet of real estate that is now going to be pitched back towards Hartford Avenue that presently is not pitched towards Hartford Avenue, presently pitched towards the individual's homes. So I think that no matter, just in that alone, we're creating a better situation. We're moving 7.5 feet of water back towards Hartford Avenue and then towards the individual house. And then if you add that one little drain in front of the driveways, there's really not much more you can do.
I have a concern that if we take out that buffer, the concrete buffer, right now we're sort of controlling that entire strip, and we're regrading the whole thing. If we just go with the sidewalk and the existing bituminous curb, we're going to have all kinds of different stuff going on in that grass strip, different elevations, ponding. So we're going to have to go in and landscape all that anyway. The chances that we're going to bring in all that heavy machinery and not damage that asphalt curb, I think, they're going to really have to tiptoe around there if we're going to be re-landscaping, regrading, or maybe recompacting those soils in that 2.5 foot buffer. That's a tight spot. I can see that curb getting damaged, us having to redo the curb. $39,000 is the savings for taking out that portion and just grass.
That's just the buffer. That's not the curb, Jim.
Well, that's taking out. My understanding Kurt, is that taking out everything from the sidewalk to the curb, basically?
If we
$1,000 savings.
If we and Carly, can you do me a favor? Can you do a save as of the Hartford Avenue PD cost estimate and take out the stamped concrete and the concrete curbing?
Okay.
and then, and while I'm babbling, you could do that. And then add in a new bituminous concrete curb. So I'm going to close out of the estimate, do a save as. Let's just see what the new number is.
Okay.
So, in order to, the number that I took out with the 39, that's the stamped concrete. What Carly's going to do right now is also take out the new concrete curbing. Because if you remember, we're doing an integral sidewalk, that a new concrete curb is actually part of the sidewalk. So it'll be more than just the $39,000. So what we would have to do, and what Jim says is a valid point, that I suspect the bituminous curb would just get so damaged that they'd probably put a new one in. But the good news is installing a new bituminous curb is much less expensive than installing a new concrete curb. So if you envision the project, and these are some of the numbers Carly's crunching right now, if you envision the project, we go in, take out the existing curb, build the new sidewalk, which in this case would be a 5-foot wide sidewalk with just the space in there. They would then put in a new bituminous curb, essentially where it is today. During that process, they would also form up all of the driveway openings. So there's another reason where probably wouldn't be able to salvage existing curb, because of, if you recall, we want to clean up all these driveway openings. But that's okay, because putting in the new bit curb would lend itself well, right? And then they would fill the topsoil in, put the mailboxes back, put the signs back, and seed it. And then we'd have, like, it would be no different, back of sidewalk, slope down with grass. That whole 7.5 foot, consisting of 5-foot sidewalk, 2.5 foot grass strip, would pitch toward the street, and there would be your sidewalk. All right, Carly, did I buy you enough time?
So what I did is I took out the stamped concrete and the concrete curb, and say we were to replace all of the bit concrete curb, we get a total of 221,000, just over that.
And what was our previous number?
Oh, now you're testing me.
303750.
Yeah.
3,750.
80,000.
So now
We're talking real money now.
clearly it's up to the committee. Yeah, it becomes real. Yeah.
And that takes out the mailboxes. The cost of the mailboxes and the new street signs or whatever. We still might have to replace some street signs, but
And like Jim was saying, then we'd still need to landscape that area that was going to be stamped concrete. But that's
Oh,
only
wow.
probably a few hundred.
foam and seed, yeah, that's not a lot there.
I did want to mention, just because these two projects, well, the project, but we sort of have two with Hartford Avenue and Shore Road. And they're obviously interrelated. Is it, and I'm just going to ask the question, that way it will inform this discussion and sort of some of the conclusions we derive from the Hartford Avenue project. Is it even an option to reduce the scope of the Shore Road portion of the project? And when I say reduce, it would be in length. Because there's really no other, based on the nature of that, there's no other, we can't reduce the width of the sidewalk. So any reduction on Shore Road that would be contemplated, if it's even contemplated, and that's the question I'm asking, would be to limit the length of that project as a way to save money.
I think we were the initial conception. We had an idea that Shore Road would be divided into two. I forget where the division was, but let's assume it was Hartford Avenue going east and then Hartford Avenue going west. We thought it was very important to go east because of transportation area and that parking lot. In terms of the whole thing, the Hartford Avenue portion with the stamped concrete versus grass buffer, Shore Road, I think we have to start looking at, it's great to get this estimate. I mean, we're getting some real numbers here, we're getting some real choices. We have to start looking at the project as a whole, as I think you're suggesting, Kurt, and see what the options are. Shore Road is going to give us some fits. We know that with some of the signs. So I think maybe this is something we tuck in our hat for Hartford Avenue. We say, all right, we have a choice. We have choice A, where we can make it look sort of like a community. You're coming into Sound View and it's got a look to it. And these things do matter. The stamped concrete will tie the whole street together all the way down to the beach. You'll know you're in a place, and not just another suburban neighborhood with some little cottages and varied architecture. It's something that the same way it pulled everything together on Lower Hartford Avenue, and a lot of homeowners stepped up their game too to sort of bring their aesthetic up to what the sidewalk is doing, because we've seen so many property owners improve their properties since the sidewalk's gone in. I think that's a benefit to the upper part of Hartford Avenue. So that's option A. Option B is going with essentially what we have and running a 5-foot sidewalk down, which is Frank's preference, if I'm not mistaken. And that's got a savings that appears to be of $82,000. So that's our price tag for aesthetics, I guess we could say. And then I think next step, let's look at Shore Road. Same way that Kurt just broke down Hartford Avenue, let's break down Shore Road and see what that looks like if we could. And then take a look at the project holistically and see what our menu choices are, how we hit our $400,000 number, how much under we can get, because there's going to be cost overruns and, so maybe we just move on to Shore Road.
If I remember correctly, we had sidewalks going from roughly the police station to Cross Lane. Am I correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
So with the advent of the transportation center now, that whole section between Old Colony Road and Swan Avenue Extension, part of a transportation center with actual place for bus. We really don't need a sidewalk there because we have the transportation roadway, so to speak, that'll parallel Route 156. So we could actually start our sidewalk to the east side, to the west side of Swan Avenue Extension and go to Cross Lane. And
Carly,
chunk.
Can you do a quick look at the total linear footage of Shore Road sidewalk?
Yes.
Just how many linear feet it is right off the CAD plan, or is easier.
Okay, 1 second.
Kurt,
Kurt and everyone, I think.
Kurt, the sidewalk for Shore Road is 5 foot, correct? Would we consider doing a 4 foot?
I don't think DOT would allow that. Their minimum standard is 5 foot sidewalk. It has to.
4 foot on Harvard Avenue.
Certainly could be a question for DOT. I suspect, I'm speculating, but I suspect based on past project experience, that they would not accept anything less than 5 feet?
Kurt, we'd probably also have to be sure with the bus company that they will indeed provide the bus shelter and all that. We talked to them and I got some positive feedback, but we probably would want to get something in writing that they will provide the shelter. The construction company working Connecticut Water's Mizzy Construction will build a road at the end, and that hasn't been designed and costed out, but they would do a certain amount of that. They would not do the actual road surface, so that would be a town expense. Not necessarily borne by the project here, but it's something we'd have to think about. So if we were to limit that, we ought to be sure we're firm on that.
Yeah. And my recommendation on that would be go with a gravel road initially. That way, A, it's impervious. You don't run into stormwater issues and whatnot. B, it's very cost effective, right? It's pretty cheap and easy to install. And C, it gives you the flexibility that if for some reason logistics are not quite what you thought or those kinds of things, you haven't committed yourself to something that is more permanent than paving it. Plus it's seasonal. So in other words, it's not really ever going to get plowed or whatnot. It really, in my opinion, lends itself to a gravel roadway. And then if it turns out that it's being used a lot, it's exactly where you want it or whatnot, you could always pave it in the future. But my recommendation would be to make the initial road a gravel roadway. And the bus shelter is the kind of thing that will probably just arrive totally prefabricated on the back of a truck, and they literally just drop it onto some concrete footings. Just a thought specific to the bus shelter issue.
I'm not sure that the 9-town transit is seasonal. I think they probably operate year-round, maybe on a different schedule, but they probably fold up at Labor Day. And
I just did a measurement from Old Colony to Swan Avenue. It's 100 feet, according to Google Maps.
And the total length of the sidewalk we have right now is just over 1,200 feet.
1,200?
Yep.
Kurt, do these numbers include contingency?
Yes, they do.
What, 5%?
Carly, I believe we have 10 at this point.
I believe. Let me just double check.
So the reason that I wanted Carly to do the full length was just to get a dollar per foot type.
200
It's about
feet.
200 a foot. Yeah. So that way, as we talk about reducing sections, we can now actually convert that to real dollars.
$20,000.
Mm-hmm. And then
$20,000 added on to the 89,000 over there. You got $100,000, which is we're getting a lot closer.
Now you're getting pretty close. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Closer to our number.
Yep.
And contingency is 10%.
Okay. Does the Shore Road include stuff for signage relocation? Do you know?
No, because DOT said that they wanted the sidewalk to have the buffer strip and be back from the edge of road, so signage was not affected.
Oh.
And they do that because long term, they don't want to have to deal with signage that's in concrete or something. They want to keep it as easy for themselves as possible. And it's because their right of way is so large. So they wanted that minimum 3-foot buffer to accommodate all their signs, those kinds of things.
I go back to what Jim was talking about earlier, and that's that statement of aesthetics, which I think is important. But in as much as the upper part of Hartford Avenue is part of the aesthetic view of Soundview. So is Shore Road. And I think Shore Road is probably in more need of an aesthetic makeover than the upper part of Hartford Avenue, with all the mismatch of signs and curbing and everything else that goes on there. So, I mean, I would rather see us put some time and effort into the thought process of Shore Road, keeping Hartford Avenue in mind, but making sure that Shore Road is accommodated. I think that's all part of the gateway. That's all part of the Soundview community, and we have to really be aware of that and do our best to make that positive effect. You go down Shore Road now; it's a big mismatch. It's a big hodgepodge. I think we could clean that out tremendously with some sidewalks.
Well, maybe we could, at this point, are we all agreed that we're going to follow Kurt's suggestion and just go with the slope, the grass slope, no stairs on Hartford Avenue? And maybe we can make a decision on that, and then leave the second decision of stamped concrete versus grass buffer on Hartford Avenue to a later meeting when we determine what goes on Shore Road, and focus on what we can do on Shore Road and what the costs are there.
I have no problem getting some harder numbers on Shore Road before we make a solid decision on Hartford Avenue. I know, because I'm kind of all about the numbers at this point in time. I mean, I could visualize the wish list, but then I've got to come down to reality here, and what the bucket we have to work with is only 400,000. So, and I know a lot of our support for this project was for the Shore Road sidewalks, and I think we really need to do that as integral.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the grass slope that Kurt, suggested. Obviously, it's a numbers game, and we're not going to be able to do any concrete retaining walls and any of that. That's like pie in the sky at this point. So, doing the slope with that, it seems as if Shore Road, there's not a lot of wiggle room for us, other than eliminating portions of it, which, kind of defeats the purpose as well. Aside from the mailboxes on the upper part of Hartford Avenue, is that the only reason why we're trying to keep a buffer, for garbage cans? Because the lower section of Hartford Avenue on the east side is only with sidewalk. They do not have any buffer for garbage cans or, whatnot. So if we were to move the sidewalk to the edge of road, does that help with the slopes of the driveways, Kurt, in any way that we could save money as well?
Yeah, the buffer is put in. One of the reasons is, yes, the garbage cans and the mailboxes. Another reason is we need to have clearance between the edge of a roadway sign and the face of the curb, which is considered the edge of the travel way. So that's why it was introduced to create that separation it's basically physical real estate to accommodate the signs.
How did they get around that on the lower section of Hartford Avenue on the east side there?
Off the top of my head, I can't recall. I'd have to take a look at that to see where those signs were placed.
The bump outs, and the bump outs were used for the garbage cans, for the trash cans. That's on the west. Yeah,
the east side, there's no bump outs. There's nothing. And people put their garbage cans in the road. Like I do in my own neighborhood. I have put it in the road. So I understand your point, Kurt, about the signs and people walking into them. But obviously it was, I wasn't on for the lower section, so I don't know how that was addressed then.
I don't recall it coming up, frankly.
I will certainly look at that. In fact, I'm as we're talking, I'm going to try to find that right now.
I mean, it may not even save much money moving the sidewalk to the road. It may be a moot point. I was just curious as to You couldn't do it down on the east side because of the fences and people's property is much closer, obviously, on that side. But I'm just curious. That's all.
Yep, and as we, I can look at that right now. I'm looking at a
Well, and while you're looking at that, you know, one of the things as you're looking down Hartford Avenue is to have some symmetry. And you know, if one side of the street has concrete to the curb and the other side doesn't, you know, that looks odd, I would think, to the eye a little bit. Whereas on the lower half of Harvard Avenue, you know, you see sidewalk on both sides.
wouldn't you know it, they have old photography in Street View. So let me actually go to the project folder. I can do that very quickly if it's okay with everybody. And I'll look at some photographs, and I want to be able to answer your question intelligently.
Frank, do you feel, assuming DOT would be amenable to a different width of sidewalk on Shore Road? You know, I'm just thinking just number of walkers. We have more pedestrians on Hartford Avenue, at least right now, than we do on Shore Road. Do you think the difference between 5 foot, 4.5 foot, or 4 foot would detract from cleaning up Shore Road?
I think the 5 foot sidewalk, 5 to 4 foot, 4 to 5 foot sidewalk on Shore Road, either one would be okay. I think the 4 foot sidewalk on Hartford Avenue would be adequate. I mean, that's a lot of yards of concrete when you add it all up by taking a foot away from the width of the sidewalk. So I mean, I would think that if we could go with a 4 foot sidewalk on Hartford Avenue with the buffer and the sloping and make everything as best as possible there. And if DOT required a 5 foot sidewalk on Shore Road, go with that. You know, I think, you know, we could get real close to our numbers here. But as you were going along, you're talking about symmetry. I think if you look down Hartford Avenue, if you have a concrete curb on the right side, along with a buffer strip of concrete and a concrete sidewalk and all grass on the left side, then once again, you lost your symmetry there. So I think keeping the asphalt bituminous curbs on both sides with grass buffers, I think keeps that symmetry to some extent. If we go with 4 foot sidewalks, it increases it a little bit better and saves us some money. Once again, I think Shore Road is really critical to this project. So, you know, that's just my point there. Also, I think it would be also great to be able to put that little signage there on the front, on the top of Hartford Avenue. And I don't think we've even addressed that yet. The entry to Hartford Avenue. I'm not sure that's addressed in any of these quote estimates. Are they, Kurt?
Yeah, we had talked about that, Carly and Jesse. Did we end up including that? That's the gateway sign that we were talking about.
We included that under the Hartford Ave cost estimate.
Was it 3,000?
1,000 is the price.
So the sign is in there.
Can you say that again, Carly? I'm sorry. How much it was?
Okay, 3,000, and we included that on the Hartford Ave cost estimate.
Thank you.
And that includes the realignment of the top end of Hartford Avenue also, correct?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
New curb line.
New curb line on the upper part of Hartford Avenue. That is included in the Hartford Avenue quote?
Yes.
Okay.
Up until the crosswalk.
That the crosswalk and anything north of that is part of Shore Road.
It starts to transition, yeah. So I did find a photograph, basically standing at the end of Hartford Avenue looking up. And essentially, we put the signs right at back of curb. And now some of this stuff is coming back to me. There's only a couple of signs on that side of the road, and DOT actually gave us a bit of a, I guess I'll call it a waiver, because we were having real estate issues with the parking and the width of the road. There was physically nowhere else to go, because on that side of the road, that'd be the east side, the back of the sidewalk is right at the right of way with a 5-foot sidewalk. So we had no choice but to put the signage right at back of curb. So now it's starting to come back to me, and they kind of gave us like a waiver for the few signs that were on that side of the road.
Okay, thanks for looking at that, Kurt.
Absolutely. Sorry it took so long.
We're gonna, the way I understand is we're gonna, look at our Shore Road as, real numbers on Shore Road and determine what whether we can go with a 4-foot sidewalk on either Shore Road or Hartford Avenue. That's kind of what we're looking at now. That's cost savings.
That would be helpful to have that 4-foot analysis.
So I will continue to try to get a hold of DOT. That's one of, I'll add that to my list of questions for them. So if I can't get them by the end of the week, I think I will need some help. It's extremely frustrating to be able to engage them. I know they're still on an adjusted work schedule, but boy.
Have your emails also gone ignored, Kurt?
Say again?
Have your emails also been ignored from DOT?
Yes, they have. I just reached out to Craig Babowitz on Friday, so I'll give him a pass until, for a couple days, but District 2, I'm quite frustrated because my emails have gone ignored. As an interesting side note, when I did talk with the gentleman from Connecticut Water, I had emailed him maybe 2 weeks ago, and I had also called him and left him a message, never heard back. So when I tried him on Friday, I tried his office, and then I tried the cell number, and he picked up. So in the conversation, I was asking him what their schedule was and the like, and it sounds like they'll be done way before we're out there. But he said, if anything changes, I'll get a hold of you. And he said, I said, do you need my contact information? He said, oh no, I have your email from the email you sent me a while back. Okay, so you did get my email.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I sometimes it can be extremely frustrating. But I will continue to try to get a hold of them.
I agree.
That
Holding them through internal channels is the best route to go. I think that's definitely the best route to go. So
yeah.
if you do need the help, and we'll get, maybe Tim, Council of Governments can help in that. Getting hold of somebody or Devin Carney or Paul Formica. I mean, that's the only other routes I would go.
I'm gonna call them every day, and I'll send Rick another email and say, hey, I have some questions about the Shore Road. When can you talk? So we will do that. We'll see if we can get their feedback. Does the committee want us to redo the cost estimate, eliminating? We just ran some of the preliminary numbers, but eliminating the section between Old Colony and Swan. We could do that very quickly.
Yeah, I might as well. I don't see any reason for it.
I mean, we'll have that done now that we have the cost model set up. We'll have that to you tomorrow.
And does the committee want to vote on grass slopes on the town right away of Hartford Avenue? have a yay for,
Might as well do that now, I think. Just get that off our plate.
can I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second, please. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Eric. It's unanimous. Thank you, guys.
I'd have a kind of an offline conversation with the chair of the zoning commission regarding signage on Route 156, because that was one of the concerns that I think we brought up a while back, moving signs around that are non-conforming and so on and so forth, and how we can handle those. So I posed the problem to him, and he just said, "Good question." So he's got to kind of look into it and see whether the signs, if they're non-conforming, moved, if they remain grandfathered in or not.
Zoning has told us in relation to the gas station that zoning doesn't really apply to Shore Road, which I know isn't true, but I think as far as they're concerned, what happens in Soundview, they don't care. So, that's how the LED sign happened. That's why that sign's on all night long now. It's illuminated 24 hours.
New zoning. We do have a new zoning enforcement officer and a new chairman of the zoning commission who happens to be a resident of Old Soundview. So
hopefully there's a little bit more willingness to apply town-wide zoning to Soundview and not have Soundview be a no man's land or a no person's land.
I agree. It was very frustrating in the previous administration.
So that's one of my concerns. We move signs and then people can put up essentially whatever they want. And all of a sudden we just start looking like a random, strip mall in a random town in a random state, and not an entrance to a lovely beach community, but just another crappy strip mall, with a lot of LED signs, hodgepodge of signs, and a little sidewalk connecting all of them. That's, I don't know what leeway we have, how much design, how many design choices we can sort of enforce, how much zoning is willing to work with us. There's a lot of issues that are going to come up in Shore Road once we start changing things there. It could be, maybe, I don't know, I haven't had any discussions, but maybe Dimitri just doesn't need a sign, maybe he doesn't want one. I know right across the street from me, we had the appliance store, and they had one of these internally illuminated box signs for Whirlpool, and that'd been there for years. And the new people just took that sign right out. They decided they didn't need that sign, and they took it out.
I think it only boils down to three signs total, and that's Dimitri's, Pizza Plus, and Teddy's.
Correct.
And I think you're right. So, I think if we just figure out there's Rooney's package store too. I'm not sure what he has for signage, but they, in general, Rooney's has got more signage, more square footage of signage than his property can support or should support.
I'm not sure that his is on the right of way, though. I think he's on his property. I'm not 100%, but I think he's on his property.
I just bring that up because it was one of the things we had talked about. I just want to say, kind of getting the conversation started on that end, so that possibly we won't run into that as our next roadblock. I just had the opportunity, so I thought I'd bring it up and see where we go from there.
Yeah, and I want to stress, we did not include that work in the current estimate. So as I mentioned last time, the way that DOT approaches these projects, I know we're not DOT, but from sort of a basic vanilla type situation, their project would remove the sign and they would just set it aside for someone else to install afterwards.
We lost Joe there. Did she go away? Yeah.
Yeah, she lost her connection.
Kurt, do you believe that the DOT would require concrete on Shore Road because snow plows and the like, it's more durable and so forth?
Yes, their standard sidewalk is a 5-inch thick concrete sidewalk. And to confirm, the bituminous curb would remain.
Yeah, because when you get those big state trucks going along, those bituminous curb sections get bounced sometimes.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And to Jim's point, we are assuming, or I should say, along the line, of Jim's point about the curbing getting damaged, we're assuming that on Shore Road, the curb will stay because we're a bit further in, and that we're assuming most of the work that they do will be in a linear format, whereas they won't be working in the road because DOT wouldn't want them to, that they'll do the project off the side of the road in sort of like a linear manner. So I just wanted to point that out, that we're assuming that the curb is going to be salvaged and that the work out there will be a little bit more surgical because of the nature of Shore Road as a higher speed road, that they would try to do as much of the work as they could off the road. We do have some maintenance and protection of traffic in there because there probably will need to be periods where there's a police detail, or at least a uniform flagger out there. But I think DOT will dictate that. But for the most part, we're hoping that they can do it in a bit more of a surgical manner off the road.
So Kurt, back to the 4-foot versus 5-foot, and you had said, I think DOT would require the 5-foot on Shore Road, but you weren't sure about Hartford Ave. Is that because Hartford Ave is a town road?
That is
And
correct. Yep, absolutely. And what would essentially make them say, nope, you will have a 5-foot sidewalk, is the fact that they're paying for it. So I suspect that they're going to say, because it's a connectivity grant and it's DOT money, it has to be done to DOT standards.
Okay.
But we will confirm. And I'm looking at Shore Road.
Are you back?
Hi, Mary Jo.
Well, hi. My internet went out right after I made a profound statement, apparently, and so I'm now calling in on the phone. I have no screen. Sorry.
We got very worried about you there for a moment. Didn't know what happened.
I'm taking a look.
I hope I didn't miss anything here.
So Teddy's, he does have a sign in front of the building, and it would have to get relocated. I'm pretty sure it is. It is.
There you are. You're back.
Thank you, Comcast. Who knows?
We've been having a heck of a time with Comcast internet lately ourselves. Could be going in and out.
I'm just trying to. Yeah, I'm not quite sure about Teddy's sign.
Well, it's in the right of way.
It is definitely in the right of way, for sure.
And he'd never make the setbacks with moving it in front of his building.
But
I
yeah,
didn't want to bring that up as a big,
yeah.
talking part, right? And I just wanted to mention it that, it's a thought, it's part of the thought process. And as we talked, Mary Jo, in previous about the signage up there, we're going to have to address it at some point in time.
Okay, so we will recalculate the Shore Road estimate, eliminating the old colony, and we know based on the calculations we did here, about how much it'll be, but we'll refine it. I will pursue DOT about the width of the sidewalks. And I guess we'll also, between Jesse, myself, and Carly, we will also try to think of some potentially other cost-saving things. And I would ask the committee to please do the same. And, you know, maybe we'll come up with a collection of a few things that when we put them together can also help. Every little bit helps. So I think between everybody, we might be able to come up with some other things that maybe aren't jumping out at us right now.
Good point, Kurt. Thank you.
Could we discuss our next meeting time? Because it's already 2:30 and I know we have to break off. You have a selectmen's meeting coming up, Mary Jo. So
Yeah, excuse me, while I was away, did you guys do anything on the community information outreach discussion? Or are we postponing that again till?
we didn't discuss it. We still don't have enough to give them now. I don't think.
I agree. Okay, so yes, next up is our next meeting.
We would like to submit something to DOT next week. So if I could, I'd like to propose we have another meeting at this time next Monday. We were talking today and our goal is to get Shore Road complete as a preliminary design this week. And again, like I said earlier, at some point, we just need to put something on paper and get it in front of DOT. And I think we're pretty much at that point. And remember, even if we showed it theoretically going from all the way from Old Colony, we could change. It's okay. We could change it. DOT doesn't care from that perspective, that if we were to remove a section later on, they don't care. So I would just like to get something in front of them to at least give us yet another reason to say, hey, can you please give us some feedback? And because the cost issues have become so critical to us, I want to try to find out, is there anything that they're thinking or that maybe we're not even thinking about that could really throw a wrench into things? So I almost want to just get something into them to force them to respond to us.
So we have a proposal for January 22nd at 1 p.m. How does that fit with people's schedule?
Well, if we make it June 22nd, it'd be fun.
Sorry, June 22nd. It's okay.
Good with me.
Yeah.
And what we would do is we'll just kind of walk through the Shore Road design with you, get your feedback. And if there were minor changes, we'll make them. Or if everybody says, no, we're good with it, we would literally send it to DOT either that day or the next day. So the purpose of the meeting would really kind of be to get your permission to get it into them.
Okay.
At the same time, we'll advance Hartford Avenue to kind of it's pretty much there, but we'll advance it to the pretty much the final design. We'll put together some materials to show you with the strip like we talked about today. I don't want to just throw materials at you, but if that'd be helpful for anybody.
Yeah, that'd be good. And the cost revisions that we talked about, that would be awesome.
Yes. So we'll be able to present those. Okay.
So Frank said, okay. I heard Jim, okay. Is that okay with you, Eric?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, and I'm all right. I'm hoping it'll be okay for Bonnie, but that'll be a quorum. Tim, do you have that?
That works.
Okay, great. All right. That'll be our next meeting. We're getting to know each other weekly. Next thing on my agenda is to approve our minutes from June 8th. Is there anyone that has a motion for that?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Thank you, Eric. Have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Frank. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Unanimous. Thank you. Is there any public on? Hearing none. How about a motion to adjourn? I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
BSC, it was nice to meet you, Carly. Thank you, Jesse. Thanks as always, Kurt. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. We'll have some good info for you to follow.
Okay,
Have a great week, everybody.
You too.
bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
You.